Welcome to Lead the Way, the podcast where we dig into the evolving world of independent journalism, creator-led media, and what it takes to build trust and sustainability in today's landscape. Today we're joined by Bubba Atkinson, a digital media veteran who's helped shape some of the most impactful newsroom strategies of the past decade. From his early work at IJ Review and Axios to launching Bubba News, he's been at the forefront of building teams, shaping editorial voice, and rethinking how news is delivered in a fast-moving, fragmented environment. We're excited to talk with him about everything from smart brevity to virality, from team culture to audience trust, and where independent creators fit into the future of news. Bubba, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Bubba, what are you doing these days? Like what does that even mean? Everything we just talked about there in that intro. Like what kind of work are you into?
Uh, my parents always say it's impossible to describe. I'm a digital media consultant. Like, I think what I do is I'm thinking about basically how can you optimize distribution and production? That's how I break media down into like a couple different buckets, because you're going to need to figure out like what's your goal? Is it the distribution side, or is it more of like a mission-based production side? So I'm like pondering, how can I optimize every situation for every client that I've got these days, no matter what they want? And I'm thinking like, what's ahead? Where have we come from and where are we going in sort of like the media environment? So like I do like consider myself like philosophizing about the internet and media, especially in the news world a lot. I'm breaking that down into how that looks and feels at the operational level for the creator themselves. And then I'm just like talking to people a lot. Like, I'm always just kind of calling people and sort of figuring out like what are they working on. Like I said, I'm working with clients these days, and I've been doing that since I left Axios. It's been about 6 years or so. But I'm always considering like, should I do something on my own, or what am I going to be doing in the next 5 or 10 years as well? I don't have an answer there, but I'm always thinking about it.
As a sort of a brief plug for you, and part of the reason that I was so excited to get you on the show is just as we were sort of conceiving Leadwire and starting to get the platform up and running, I talked to like 3 or 4 different people, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you got to talk to Bubba. If you're launching a new media platform, like Bubba's the guy to talk to. This guy, nobody's thought about it more than he has." So, thank you for coming on. This is gonna be fun. It'll be great to talk.
Of course. I always find that there's a lot of journalists, there's a lot of people that work behind the scenes. There's not as many people that have worked from the ground floor like I have. When I started with IJ Review, I had to write 8 articles a day, 7 days a week for about 18 months before I got a team under me. And that's a lot more than most people have to produce. And I was running all the Facebook stuff as well. We were mainly Facebook dependent. So I've learned everything at every step, from doing it myself to leading teams from bootstrap to venture capital. So I recognize that I have a unique perspective, and I've been in the trenches myself. And I think a lot of people have kind of been on either side of it a little bit more.
Well, you've run a podcast studio before. How are we doing so far? Because I'm
Doing great.
Thanks.
We've all got audio and video. We're good to go.
Well, it's a good start. It didn't happen right away. It took a few
Always
took a few
does.
tweaks this morning. So, well, what draws you to this? Like, why are you into this business? And where did that come from? Was that something? Was your family a part of this industry, or this was just something you were drawn to as fresh out of school?
So I was an accounting major. I graduated at the tail end of the recession, and I was, as you can see, the guitars behind me. I was waiting tables. I'd caddy in the morning. I'd wait tables at night, and I'd play in cover bands after that. I just couldn't get a job. I mean, I was applying for jobs at, kind of financial firms. I bought the CPA study guides and said, no, that's not for me. Going into the accounting industry. And I was just kind of desperate after 3 years, recognizing like, hey, I'm making a lot of cash with these, as a 23-year-old or whatever, with these, service type jobs, but I could see that wasn't going anywhere. I started a blog in the very beginning of 2012 called Bubba Finds a Job. And it started as a spreadsheet to track my progress of what am I going to do to get a job. And I was like, I'm going to apply to finance jobs in New York and just like suck it up and go work up there and figure it out. My sister was living up there at the time, so I figured that was a good route to turn into an adult. And along the way, I was like, I think it was about 2 or 3 days in, I was like, man, this spreadsheet just doesn't have a lot of the commentary or the color that would actually help me. Like, I'm not going to go look at a spreadsheet and say, I applied to these jobs at Viacom. And I started writing almost like a journal, and I posted it on Blogspot at the time, and I posted it to Twitter, and all of a sudden dozens of people came in to see it. So I said, let me get back on Facebook. I hadn't been on Facebook for several years, and all of a sudden it just took off within my network. I mean, it got like 1,500 or 2,000 hits, which, like, for a small blog like that out of nowhere to get that type of interest was really curious. What that turned into is me recognizing, like, oh, I have this ability to attract people to this like ongoing narrative, and I actually like creating stuff. One of my friends from Charleston recognized this, and he had a Facebook page that was called Conservative. It was like a center right Facebook page at the time, and he was a pioneer of growing a Facebook page. I mean, he was one of the first people to do it. And he said, "Hey, if you come in and do what you did with your blog, where you're writing here, but you're sending people from your social media to that, we could start a business out of this potentially." So I said yes to that, and I mean, the rest is history. I mean, I truly stumbled into it. I would say, going back to the accounting major, the difference is I never looked at something as a volume metric. I always said, what's the lifetime value of this? So there's some principles from accounting that have really helped me. But as far as media goes, like, I did not do well in English. I did not do well in creative writing. I've always thought that stuff was really interesting to me, but I really figured out that's where I have a skill set and a deep interest, and I see it as like presenting something to people. So learned a lot from there, but that's how I got into it.
Well, it's kind of funny. You start as a blog, things evolved, and blogging sort of went out. I feel like blogging is how everyone is consuming it now. It might be through a Substack or, but all this, like, I guess people don't refer to it as a blog anymore, but it's basically everyone's newsletter is a blog now. It's really the way people are consuming all of their news and media.
Yeah, I think blog was a dirty word for a while. It was like, oh, like you're one of these sort of shady internet types, and you're just aggregating and it's just your stuff. I actually disagree with that kind of message. I think that blogging is some of the best stuff, and I think aggregation is incredible, and it actually is something that's needed more of. If you think about, like, something I always tell clients is demand is pretty stagnant. Like, there's only so many eyeballs on Earth, and like everybody's got a phone, so everybody's reading the internet. Like, it's not going up dramatically. Supply is going through the roof. I mean, especially with AI, it's like the supply of content is crazy. So finding content is actually really difficult. It's all out there, but finding good stuff is a little bit difficult. Blogs are what helps us identify what we like, and then aggregation brings it all together into one place. And when we were at IJ Review, everyone was like, "Oh, you guys are just aggregation," and it's like, what do you think CNN's doing? They've got a person with a little headphone in, and they're just going, "Oh, Wall Street Journal reports." It's like, why is that prestigious? But when we write it down on a new brand, it's not. I always kind of disagreed with that. I actually think the future is a little bit more like, hey, what's the hub that I want to go to? And that is more of a blog, which I think it's contextualizing the news in a way that fits for your taste.
Yeah. I want to dive into the IJ review experience because I think that one's like really cool history. But I think you touched on something there that's really important, and we've been talking about it a little bit, and that's just with AI becoming so ubiquitous and being such a big part of what everybody's doing now. There is kind of this feeling that a lot of the just the sort of basic reporting, like telling you what is happening, is going to get a little bit commoditized, right? It's going to be really easy, and I worry a little bit in that world that, like, there's just going to be so much content flooded at everybody that, like, the real creators that are doing real work and really like unpacking an issue, they're just going to get lost in the noise. And so, I think your experience is pretty good to talk to this. What is your sort of suggestion, or what would your advice be to somebody that is trying to build an audience, trying to sort of stand out in that crowd? How do you separate yourself right now when we're all just flooded with content?
If you look at the past few years, the way that you separate yourself is you have distribution power. But And I think that that's a good route to go, because you just have access to an audience that you can, leverage in an instant. Moving forward, I would say you need to have authority, like an authentic voice that has, authoritative expertise in, an area or several areas is much more valuable. When everything becomes a commodity, what's your expertise? I actually think what this is going to do is it's going to expose that a lot of people don't have expertise and that
Yeah.
ability to analyze. I've always found that, the news is a commodity. Like as soon as something happens, it's out and about.
Mhm.
What is the context and perspective that you add to that for the audience? Like that's really the important stuff, that helps the audience formulate their own opinion. Like they don't necessarily want to be told how to think, they want to be given the tools to help them understand what they think. That's going to like really expose who has the expertise. And I think that's where I would push anyone is like, know what you're talking about. And it doesn't matter whether that's like broad or narrow, but like be really good at that and think about how that affects your distribution power. Like, do people come back every day? And is it a lot of people or is it a small amount of people that can affect how you navigate as a business?
Mhm.
How are you consuming your news these days? Like how are you getting your opinions and formulating your thoughts?
That changes. I feel like when I left Axios, I was like, goodbye news. Like I've had enough of this for a while. And then, I really got into podcasts for a while. Like I was running a podcast network for a client and kind of listened to them. And I see it continually evolving. Like I was just thinking this morning, like I really like the Semaphore Media newsletter. I think Ben Smith and Max Tanny are really solid. I'm good friends with Sarah Fisher. I'll keep in touch with her here and there. Some of her media coverage at Axios is good. It's a little like bigger business media, so sometimes it's relevant to me or not. I'm still just kind of scrolling and like picking through things. Like I have a pretty strong opinion about like my ideology and philosophy on how the world should be and all that kind of stuff. So I'm more looking at how is the fallout from the narratives happening? Like you think of something like, oh, the Trump administration is considering a bunch of tariffs. My curiosity is not okay, like what's going to happen there. Like I already know what AEI and Brookings and all them are going to say about that. There have been myriad studies about it. It's how are the narratives falling out? What's the left saying about it? What's the right saying about it? Where are they stepping on their past kind of historical selves and sort of stepping on their narratives? Like I want to see how it plays out in the way that the conversation evolves. I always think about the national conversation, and with those that are close to me that I work with regularly, we talk about how this conversation evolves, and I think that's a really important factor in discourse. Like you see it in politics. It's like that's something as important to you or I, like kind of doesn't matter. It's more like how is that conversation evolving and happening, and then how are people reacting to that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, and that's actually like another topic that I'm super interested in because I think when you started at IJ Review and really when you started at Axios, the national conversation looked a lot different. Like people actually were still having a conversation, whereas nowadays it sort of seems like we're all kind of living in our own little echo chamber. We're living in our own little bubble, and and I'm kind of curious, because I think the way what you just described is probably a little different from what a lot of people are doing, where you want to see what the right's talking about and what the left is talking about. I'm not sure a ton of people are doing that. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on like, are there ways to kind of bridge that gap and get that conversation started again in a thoughtful way where we're not all just screaming at each other and, like on Twitter or whatever it is.
It's difficult. Like you kind of have to do work, and I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's where I have to check out of social media sometimes, just because
Yeah.
it gets infuriating. I have this belief that I don't think that when you go to the echo chambers, I actually think that the retention is quite short, in the grand scheme of things. I think the natural evolution that I talk about specifically on the right, like I'm really an expert on right leaning or center right type media, which means I understand the whole spectrum, but like I kind of specialize in that center right, especially coming from the IJ review world. But I think the average person goes, man, this mainstream media is just like it's just not hitting. Like I understand the distrust. Everybody says they distrust it. I see where they're messing up. It gets called out all the time on podcasts and Twitter and all that stuff. Like I'm out of that. And then they see something like a Ben Shapiro clip or something on Twitter, and they go, I actually agree with that guy. And I'm going to pick on Ben and Daily Wire here, and like some people may like him and others may not, but I am going to pick on him here. I think they see that and they go, I agree with that. Like that, what he's saying makes a lot of sense. He's reacting to this thing that is like objectively wrong or, misconstrued or whatever. And then they go, I'm going to check into this Daily Wire thing. And then they go into that and they say, you know what? I do feel like a patriot. I'm going to give them $120 a year, whatever the subscription is. And then they get in there and they listen to that podcast for a few minutes and they go, man, these guys they're kind of mad. Like that's just like a lot to handle on a daily basis. Like I don't actually need that all the time. Like just because I agree with it doesn't mean I need that presentation. And I think that that drives them away from that. I think what you see right now in media, like to that point, is you see a lot of reactive personalities. And what they are not is like productized, formats. Like they're not Axios AM, they're not Politico Playbook, they're not New York Times The Daily. And I think that that's kind of missing right now. So I think it's actually like really tough for the average person to sort of know where to go. I do think the future evolves into like a better spot where some of these things are figured out. Like I look at Puck, I think they're doing a pretty good job. They kind of like string along narratives with experts, take them or leave them, whether you like them or not, sort of navigating you through whether it's politics or media or whatever. Punch Bowl is another one that I think is great. Like if you want congressional, like Capitol Hill coverage, like there's no one better than that. So you kind of see these things. They're not. There's personalities behind them, but they're wrapped around a brand, which is like it's basically a new institution. So you're seeing an old institution breakdown. You've seen fragmentation. Fragmentation is not the answer. There's going to be a new wave of consolidation that I think is probably going to happen in the next, like, I don't know whether it's 5 or 10 years. And that's going to help people go like, oh, I actually am interested in this or that. And that's going to be a much better pathway for them to consume the news than right now, which is, it can be a little infuriating.
Sure.
What was the thought process but with Axios and the founding of Axios and really how did that model come into play and what is that model? I mean that model seemed new and groundbreaking.
So you got to go back and look at what Jim Vandehei was saying. Like, those guys left Politico because I mean, I'm sure this is out and about. Like, they just didn't get along with Robert Albritton at Politico, and like, I don't think they got the way that they wanted. So they jumped out, a handful of them, Mike Allen, Roy Schwartz, Jim Vandehei, and they started Axios. And Jim wrote at theinformation.com this thing called the crap trap. And he was like, basically everything on the internet's like a bunch of crap. Like you need to have more expertise and authority. So he came into Axios and he was like, it's smart content for smart people. Smart people don't have a lot of time. You got to get your information across really quickly. So he brought me in along with like a handful of others, and we were kind of like the core executive team there. And the whole thing was like, how do you have this like elegant presentation for like almost like staccato like information? And he kind of saw like people want the information, they don't want like an 800 word essay. So he had sort of the vibe. Now he brought in a couple developers and designers from I believe they were from New York Times Labs, and they were designing out this. I mean, it was a feed. Like, at the time you had like the Atlantic or New York Times or whatever had like, long form articles, and then you get to the end of it and it's like, well, what now? Axios was like, no, we're going to be more of a feed. And then my role was like, I was helping with the audience stuff, but it was like, what is this going to look like on paper? And I had like a really strong opinion because like at IG Review, we had done a lot of like listicles, and you're seeing like, how can I keep people on this page? And what does a format look like in a modern time? Like if you go back and think about what a journalism school was teaching, it was like, hey, you should do the inverse pyramid. Well, why did the inverse pyramid exist? Because it's on paper and you can like cut the end of it and go to the printing press, like that doesn't fit for when the Facebook algorithm says time on site is a big deal. So how can you draw people down and give them what they want or what they need, and then give them the option for what they want? So pretty quickly we developed that smart brevity format that says, here is the news, here is why it matters, and then there's a read more button if you want some of that context and perspective, and it's more of like a memo for smart people. Now, that's a slightly different presentation. In retrospect, I would say the content wasn't like that different from like Politico or Washington Post or New York Times or anything else. The delivery method was, hey, we're going to productize this into an email. It's going to be called Axios AM. You're going to build this into your habit. It's going to be 10 items. It's finite. You can start it, you can finish it, you can do it every day. The brilliance there is this is something that you can consume and finish, and you don't necessarily have to check back in. Like I think there's something very strong there. The format obviously was very recognizable. It got mocked by a lot, and then you saw it getting picked up by like other outlets and being incorporated into everything because of the way that that was developed and presented. Now they could go out and get sponsors and say like, hey, JP Morgan or Meta or Google, like kind of these big um, Fortune 100 companies that have big corporate social responsibility budgets, they're going to spend on influential audiences. Hey, you can come in and you can sponsor this newsletter, and being able to have like a really sophisticated sales team to match this new presentation, to me, that's what made it a $500 million company. If it
Yeah.
was not that presentation with those products, I think that valuation drops about, half to, 70%, because it's just like the other stuff, but by putting a nice brand around it, it felt very special both to the audience and the advertisers.
Yeah. Is that getting harder now? Because they kind of had that first mover advantage, right? Like they were doing something that was really innovative, and it was, you're like, wow. A lot of people I think started getting those newsletters, and they're like, wow, this is great. Like can see all these topics I care about. I can dive in when I want to. But a lot of people are replicating that now. And and obviously we're all, everybody's kind of inundated with the sort of email newsletter. Like there's a lot more in that space than there probably was when Axios kicked it off. I'm just kind of wondering how you sort of see that continuing to evolve, and if it's gotten to be a real challenge for platforms like that.
Yeah, I mean the space is definitely more flooded than ever before. I mean, if you want a newsletter, it's like you have 1 trillion options these
Yeah.
days. I'm not on the inside, so I can't talk about this, with any real experience. But I don't think that there's as much money flowing around from those advertisers as well. Like I think
Yeah.
if you look at them, it's like, well, why do I need to go through that for some prestige factor? Why can't I go more direct to consumer? At that
Mhm.
time, like I could really see it. In today's world, I'm like, I don't know that that value is necessarily there. And then you think about the overhead that it takes to get something like Axios up and running. I mean, it's hundreds of employees. I mean, last time I checked in, it was like, I don't know, there's 500 or 700, but it wasn't like 60 people, and that's so big. So I do look at something like Puck and I go like, that's pretty different. Like it kind of has a lot of the similar mindset, but it's a lot smaller of a company. Last time I talked to John Kelly, it was like 60 people. They had advertisers and they had subscriptions. Axios was never a subscription place. You go like, they do have the Axios Pro subscription, but it looks pretty different in today's world. And I would necessarily say like you probably want to, if you're going to be more of like a mainstream like serious news company, you probably need to consider something along the lines of a subscription. And then how do you get top tier advertisers as well, so that you can have multiple streams of income?
You went from that into Bubba News. In Bubba News, you kind of changed, I think, from smart brevity to personality driven. Is that an accurate statement that you said I'm going to put some personality into this, and maybe it's still with that smart brevity, but I'm also adding a lot of who I am into this this platform?
So when I left Axios, I worked for a handful of clients over the course of several years, and it was like I was doing work for everybody else, like growing their properties and growing their audiences. So, I ran a newsletter inside of an agency. I ran a podcast company for a client. Like I had launched several other products for clients, and I was like, I kind of need to do this for myself. At the time, this is going back probably about 2.5 years, I was like, I wonder what happens when you focus on really quality editorial information from like a growth perspective. So Bubba News is like not, it was not my focus, and we haven't been writing it for a few months. We're probably going to get back into it a little bit, but um, it was really like everything else always compromised somewhere. Like even at Axios, it was like, hey, you have to do that thing, but also make sure it gets a bunch of clicks. Like there was always like, it was never, compromised editorially, but like you had to be thinking about all these other factors that went into the business side. I was like, what happens when you're pure? Like what is the audience reception that you get? And I think what I saw was it was like you get a really, really high quality audience. It just grows slow. Like
Yep.
it's trust is something that takes a ton of time. Time takes money. And I go like, man, money and time are like two massive variables. The only reason it's called Bubba News is because Bubba is a very curious word that gets people's attention. And thinking about like how do you grow trust? At that time, we were thinking there's so many like institutions out there, and then there's like other people. It's like, I do think we should be something that signals like we're the anti-institution institution. Like
Right.
Bubba just sounds like kind of rednecky. It's like, can we have something that's super smart? And I think like that's probably one of the smarter products that I've ever been a part of. It just sounds kind of redneck on the surface. So there was like some tension there between the brand and what the product was, but it was really like there was some personality in there. Like I'd add Bubba's 2 cents at the end of just about every article, and but that was more like I think being like a navigator versus having like a take. It's like, hey, if you think this, then you've got to also think about that, and how it can compromise your original principles on that idea or whatever. It's like it was more to get you thinking. So I wouldn't say it was like a personality driven product, but it was more like it was really an experiment to go like what happens when you really focus on the editorial and see what happens on everything else on the distribution side.
Hmm.
Are those things like it's something like Bubba News, and is it a moneymaker? Can you make money doing that? I mean, obviously we know Axios was generating ad revenue, but is Bubba News a moneymaker, or would that be the long term plan of it, or is it just an outlet for you, or
I mean,
both?
I still wrestle with that question, like I think what we saw, like I haven't run it since I think March is the last time we published it, and it still grows. It's grown hundreds of subscribers. So I'm going like, man, we're getting these really good signals that this was like really strong content that lasts beyond just like that newsletter cycle. So I'm sitting here going like, there's something here. I had to go back into Stripe and like refund people's subscriptions because they were paying for it when we weren't operating. So I go like, there are signals there that it really works. I think the time frame is just a long time. Like for me, I was looking at it going like, okay, like can I be my own client? Like I'm doing all this stuff for clients. Can I add something in? I think what I would and I'm considering this now, it's like it just needs more firepower. Like it was just me and my buddy Juan Leon, who's one of the most talented writers. It was just us. So I'd go back and I'd say like, okay, do we need more? We went from 5 days a week with 3 stories a day to, one story a day to, every couple days we did something. And I go, well, what would it look like if it was every day? We'd probably need a slightly larger team. What would it look like if we added social media on? We'd probably need a designer. If we had real video, what would that look like? And I think, there's a difference between like daily kind of TikTok, YouTube video and like really in depth. Some of the stuff I've done that's pretty compelling is like documentaries and like, short form mini series, stuff like that I'd want to add in. I think if you could do that, you could say like, hey, here's a subscription product and I could potentially sell that. I've never been a seller myself. So I think I would need to add a few elements around it in order to make it work. But I've kind of had a different perspective. It's like I went into it going like, well, maybe it makes a gazillion dollars. I mean, realistically, wondering that, not thinking that. But anymore, you go like, okay, if I like believe that should exist in the world, it's like, could it break even? Could it fund itself? Like I kind of have a different perspective. Having done it for a couple years and working on some other client stuff that I just kind of view it differently now.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I've been really curious about, and Chris Saliza sort of talked about this a little bit when we chatted with him, but he started growing his audience on YouTube after he left CNN, and he said after like a year of work and producing a couple videos a week and like well produced videos, he only had his audience up to like 5,000 people, but then as he started to go on just sort of like a more frequent cadence, the algorithms I think kind of helped him out a little bit more, and his audience really started to hockey stick higher. And I'm just kind of curious, like your thoughts as somebody who has, you've started a couple businesses from scratch. Like, how do you balance that need to kind of live on that cadence that the algorithms are going to reward and try and be that high frequency content because that's you got to stay in front of your audience on a regular basis, but also not compromising the quality of the work that you're doing. And like, and maybe this dovetails into the production discussion that we wanted to have as well. But how do you kind of maintain that credibility while also still staying relevant and visible for your audience?
Stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, I think that's where I start. Like, people always ask, like, when I was at IG Review, we had 20 million Facebook fans, and it's like, hey, how do you do that? And it's like, it feels like it's driving a car. Like, I can't tell you how to turn left. You just kind of know.
yeah,
It felt like that a lot of the time. And the reason I say that is because, like, I don't think there is an answer. It's like,
hmm,
hey, do it, and then if you think you overdid it, like, pull it back.
yeah,
And I think the way that I look at it now, especially with clients, is like, how do you formalize some of these things? And I always look to set rules. And this is something that we talked about at Axios, just like quick tangent here. It's like constraints are sort of the gateway to creativity. We found, and one of the ideas behind Axios was like, how do we constrain everything so that like you're forced to really think about each element that goes into it? So like, what is the news? Why does it matter? Like all of a sudden you go like, that's a really tough question to answer. Let's put all of our focus into that. So I think about formats, structure, cadence, like those are the things that I really, really think about. And if you're thinking about what's going to get somebody back on a daily basis, you go, it's got to be a product. If it's not a product, it's just like you spouting off. And I
yeah,
don't think that's a good answer. All right. Inside of that product, how does it start and end? What's the experience like for the end user there or the reader? And what are they getting on a daily basis? All right. Inside of that, what's the structure and the format of each article or post or whatever? And you go, all right, well, if I have to do it every day, 5 times a week, how many pieces of content is that? Is that 50 pieces of content? If so, there's going to be like sort of a sliding scale of depth to it. So maybe, you start with an article that's got some analysis, but then you say like, here's some other things. And we always talk about the idea of like franchises. Maybe it's like, here's a stat, here's a quote. Here is a chart or like a visual that can help guide you. It's like I kind of look for these conventions to lock in rules so that I can be consistent. And then the other thing is, if it sucks, pull the plug.
right,
Like number one above all else. And like I'm sort of an acolyte on this. It's like do not disrespect your audience. And this is where I got into tiffs with my bosses at every single step of the way, every single time. It's like if it sucks, just don't do it. Like it's hard to come up, it's hard to contrive quality information all day, every day. But I do think if you have a good structure and good formats and they're thoughtful, they don't even have to be perfect, but like you're just putting thought into like, what is it? How is it? Why is it? Then you start filling in the blanks. And I think like that's where I start the thinking, I suppose. Like I even noticed this in podcasts. Like if you say almost every podcast host we worked with, it was like, hey, what do you think you're going to do? We'll just like talk about this. And you go, okay, well, like I have 60 bullet points.
hmm,
Now, we may break those rules, we may subtract a lot of those, but here is how you can give that audience that experience. Now,
yeah,
one of the things with that and with smart brevity is you think about the reader or the listener consuming that information. That's great. And I think that's, the probably the priority is what's their experience, but the creator, it gives them a set of rules. So like when we launched Axios and we had a bunch of young news desk writers, basically a year or two out of school, how do you teach them to write better? You give them rules and you say like, I need you to stick inside of this box. I think that elevated their ability to write and specifically analyze information. So those rules, I mean, I just I can't speak enough about it.
yeah.
Yeah, we talk about that in filmmaking. Budget constraints create the most creative stunt design or special effects or just storytelling in general because you have to work within this framework and it actually I think triggers something in the brain that really activates a whole new level of creativity.
I think that actually might dovetail nicely into like the talk about IJ Review because when you started there, I mean, I think that was pretty much brand new, right? And I'm just kind of wondering how you got there and how you all thought about that platform as you were launching it because I'm assuming your budget was fairly tight and you had to figure it out from the ground up.
Well, so Alex Cattell was working in Republican politics at the committees, and he was trying to get them to invest in Facebook. He was like, "Guys, this is
Mhm.
like the future is here," and they were. I mean, I don't really know, but like from what he's told me, like they were kind of like, well, like you're more of our tech guy. Like I think they saw him more as like somebody has a problem with their computer, like he's the guy versus like how can I lead this like digital revolution here? And he was thinking very much digital revolution.
Yeah.
He was truly a pioneer. He was like, well, if you're not going to invest in Facebook, then I am. And like as soon as Pages came out, I believe his parents gave him a car, or like when he graduated from college, they were like, we'll get you a car. And he was like, I just want the money. He dumped that into Facebook and grew that page. And so when I started, it was like 1.5 million people.
Okay.
And he was like, if you write this content, we can drive it there. It was profitable early. So, I mean, there was a lot of money. He was reinvesting a lot of that into growing on Facebook. So the challenge became for me, how can I get people from point A to point B consistently? And, I could do some, kind of trashy, smutty content or whatever. Like I quickly learned that you could do that. But the question is, how do you get them there all the time? And that's where I came up with a lot of the ideas that I still have today. It's like I think about it in terms of like a diet, like what's your news diet or your content diet? It's like I
Mhm.
could give you, heroin and hook you, but like that's not very healthy. I could give you lima beans, but like that's boring and you're not going to like it. Like I kind of need to diversify what I give you a lot, and that's where a lot of the creativity came from. It's like, who are the conservative celebrities, or what was that quote that Turtle Man had about politics or whatever? It's like you would use these kind of pop culture entry points into the news, and then we'd also filter in the news, and in between all of that, we could get just like a ton of views on everything because it was like a fire hose. We
Mhm.
started working on Facebook before there was an algorithm, so I knew the Facebook algorithm better than anybody on this planet for several years because we saw exactly what was going to happen. So I knew how to, by that point, swing our operation to sort of react to what Facebook was doing with their algorithm and just driving our whole operation around that.
But
Morgan, you got anything to add to
no, I
that?
was going to say, I find that piece of it so interesting too, just given what's going on with those platforms. Like I know Facebook's driving a whole lot less traffic to news sites. I mean, Google seems like they're driving a whole lot less traffic to news sites. Twitter, they're kind of throttling links too. Like, it seems like that landscape has changed a little bit, and now these media companies that maybe sort of started to figure out that world are now having to reinvent themselves again, and it's definitely introduces a new challenge to the model.
Yeah, it was absolutely like a short-term mindset. I mean, I could see it in the moment because you're just going like, dude, we're sprinting on this treadmill and it doesn't feel like we're really getting anywhere. The way that we were at IG Review was like we were pretty low overhead, and I mean it was extremely profitable. But you're going like most of the views coming in that were, creating a lot of the metric attention were not equating to, dollar signs on the other side. So you're going like, how much of this work is wasted? And then what we never strategically did was diversify very well. So we were extremely dependent upon Facebook. And there were plenty of efforts to try to do that, which were, didn't happen for a variety of reasons. But um, you see what happens when you're dependent on a
Yeah.
platform and you just can't play. That's a metric game, and you go like you can't win a metric game long term. You can win it for a short period of time, but if your goal as a media company is to service readers, it's sort of platform independent. So anytime I look at something now, it's like yes, play with the platforms because like that's the reality of the world, but also look at where they are, and how you can get to them in different ways. Obviously, email is like a high value place. YouTube is video is like another reasonably high value place. But the way that I look at it is there's behavior, and you're either passively consuming something or you're actively consuming something.
Hmm.
Passive is effectively valueless. Now, you might make money, you might get a lot of views, that might be the top of the funnel. But if you don't have people seeking your stuff out, it's gonna be pretty tough.
Yeah. I mean, that's such an interesting big picture conversation too, because I think the whole world, and I mean, really the whole internet was kind of built around one platform, which was Google and search. And now with the advent of AI and AI search results, that model's getting upended a little bit too. And, remains to be seen where the world heads over the next couple of years, but I think it's going to be really interesting to watch this unfold.
Yeah.
Well, let's before we wrap things up, let's talk a little bit about LeadWire and what we're doing. Certainly, you've thought about micropayments and content and the model that we're approaching. I think a lot of organizations have considered what we're doing. Do you think what we're doing can work? Do you think it's needed? And like, what other thoughts and advice do you have for us as we build this company?
I definitely think it could work. I mean, I think the idea that you go out and you get this like one size fits all subscription is kind of crazy. And I have a heart like, it's like I see an Atlantic article and it's like, oh, I'd love to read that Derek Thompson thing. And then you're like, I'm not getting an Atlantic subscription, like that's just
Mhm.
straight up not happening. And in the past couple months, I have unsubscribed from Wall Street Journal and New York Times because it's like I sit there and I get the, notifications on my phone all day. And it's like, I never read this. I don't think it's worth $30 a month to get Wall Street Journal to like tell myself that I subscribe to Wall Street Journal. And yet I'm still faced with this problem of like, how do I consume that piece of content that I see popping or moving around? So like I really like the idea of being able to break that payment down into a micro payment, being able to consume what you want.
Yeah,
How do
what
you like how do you think people would mostly want to use this as a tool, right? Like, and the what I keep coming back to is, first things first, we've got to solve a content problem, right? We've got to get people access to a broad catalog of content that they're interested in. But then part two of that is like, how do you help point people in the right direction, right? Like, what tools do you think would be valuable as we start to really conceive the platform? Like, what tools would be valuable to readers to help them really find the content that they want? Like, what are the forums that might make sense there?
Well, I think one is that you've got the text side of things, which like, to use like the easy pass language, it's like it's there in case you want to use it because you can never totally understand what someone's behavior or navigation is going to be. It's
Mhm.
like you want that to be, as ubiquitous as possible. The other side of it would be discovery. And I talk about this all the time. It's like where do you go to look for, topic X? Like you go like, I don't even know. Like if I said, hey, go find me some stuff on tariffs, you'd be like, I guess I Google that, or maybe I plug it into ChatGPT or whatever. It's like where can you be a hub of information? And maybe this is like a bit overkill, but like I always think in terms of what's a good like database. Databases attract people to it as a hub. So I go, if you have a question about like who's in a movie or a show or whatever, you go to IMDb. If you want to
Mhm.
learn about flying squirrels, you go to Wikipedia. If you want music, you're probably going to Spotify. It's like what do those places do to bring people in? One, they just have really good taxonomy. I think that's like a really really understated point is like they're finding all of the information, they're pulling it together, aggregation, and they're organizing it really well for people so that people can tell us what they want, and then you're learning about those users on the back end. So I go back to the ideas of aggregation, curation, and helping people sort through the internet to find the good stuff, and then starting to tailor their experience a little bit from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm really focused on, sort of to an obsessive level right now, is like discoverability in this age, right? I mean, when there's so much information out there, and where information is, I think it's getting a little bit more commoditized. At least just like the sort of newswire type services where we just tell you what happened in an event. Like that stuff's going to be all over the place. Like how do you make good high quality content more discoverable in a way that consumers really want to come and find it, right? And that's one of the things that I think we're so focused on, and we're really working on it. So it's great to get your thoughts on that.
I think you'll find people they they say they want one thing, but then their behavior shows another. So like we found this at Axios. It's like, what do you like? They're like, I like science and business, and yet they read, politics and health or whatever it
Mhm.
was. So it's like, how can they show us what they want? Because once they do that, they're gonna dive in. That may lead them to like Chris Saliza being like, hey, like let me analyze this thing at a deeper level. And they go, oh, this guy Chris just did this. Like not only did you help them find that, but then they realize like, oh, this guy is doing this like all the time, or like a Matty Iglesias type, which it's like, he's talking about microeconomics. It's you don't know that you need that until you stumble across it. So I think
Yeah.
once people understand that their behavior can kind of help lead them, and your technology facilitates that, I think you see some better, healthier habits on the
Yeah.
internet, and you're exposing better content.
Awesome.
Well, Bubba, I appreciate you hanging out with us today, chatting with us,
Of
sharing a
course.
bunch of knowledge with us. We're learning not just how to podcast as we go. This is obviously very new to us, and hopefully we'll get better at this part of it. But really, our goal is to build a company that adds value not just to the journalistic community, but to the world as a whole. And a lot of the stuff you talked to us about today, I've learned a lot. I mean, learned a ton from you, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us and expertise. Thank you. Thanks for
Of
doing
course.
this.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks for
This is
having
fun.
me.
Really appreciate it.